Good morning.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom.
How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine maton umanayim sheberachim gam yachad. Hine maton umanayim sheberachim gam yachad. Sheberachim gam yachad.
All right. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
So good to be with you, Barbara.
You too, and a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day. So good to be with all of you that are joining us from your own spaces as well, from your own tents, about which we're going to sing in just a moment. It's great to be welcoming Shabbat together, to have the chance to just stop and breathe and relax and take a moment to take stock of who we are and where we are and who we want to become. So let's move into the next piece of our liturgy, which is Ma Tovu. As I mentioned, each of us are joining together from our own individual private spaces, but the words of these lyrics remind us how beautiful it is when we consider the collective of all of us together, each of us from our own space, all of these tents joined together in a great rainbow of belonging and community. If you're in a book, we're on page 74 for Ma Tovu. continue now with the blessing giving thanks for our wonderful, miraculous, sometimes finicky bodies, giving thanks for all of their intricate parts and reminding ourselves how important they are to our ability to join together and praise God. The words of this Asher Yatzar prayer, we'll be reading the version on page 76. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It's well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch atah Adonai, rofecho basar umafli la'asot.
Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi Elohai neshama tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi.
Now that we've acknowledged and given thanks for our miraculous bodies and our eternal luminous spirits, we'll continue with another series of blessings of gratitude for all of the blessings that we enjoy every day, that we may not always take the time to stop and acknowledge them. The Nisim B'chol Yom, the everyday miracle blessings, start in our books on page 80.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sechvivina lehavchin ben yom uven layla.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten li'aef koach.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hama'avir shena me'enai utnuma me'afapai.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzelem Elohim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani bat chorin.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Amen. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people, but the study of Torah encompasses them all. Barbara is going to unmute herself, and we're going to continue with the 150th Psalm on page 100. Oh, Barbara can't hear me. And there we go.
Hallelujah, 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 because you're hallelujah,
Chatzi Kaddish is on page 106.
Yitgadal ve'yitgadash shmei Rabbah ve'amad yivrach yirtei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechonu v'yomechon u'chayer chol beit Yisrael bagala u'nisman karim Veimeru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Lo Me'almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yipa'ar Nitramah V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei V'Kedusha, Rechu la'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushmechata v'nechemata damiran me'alma v'yimeru Amen. Please rise. Ya la 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 la. Baruch hu et Adonai
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hame'er la'aretz v'ladarim aleha berachamim, uftuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shebach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkei chulanu mehera le'oro, Baruch atah Adonai, yotzer ha'me'orot. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light blinded we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love we have to give. Gather us in peace as we lead us to your name. And we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Please be seated. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ולשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
This reflection is on page 117 of our prayer books. If we can hear the words from Sinai, then love will flow from us, and we shall serve all that is holy with all our intellect and all our passion and all our life. If we can serve all that is holy, we shall be doing all that humans can to help the rains to flow, the grasses to be green, the grains to be golden like the sun, and the rivers to be filled with life once more. All the children of God shall eat, and there will be enough. But if we turn from Sinai's words and serve only what is common and profane, making gods of our own comfort or power, then the holiness of life will contract for us. Our world will grow inhospitable. Let us therefore lace these words into our passion and our intellect, and bind them as a sign upon our hands and eyes. Let us write them and mezuzot upon our doors and teach them to our children. Let us honor the generations that came before us, keeping the promise for those yet to be. Micha Mocha is in our books on page 122.
שבכל גאולים לשמך שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך אדוני ימלוך לעולם צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדחנו ממך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
As we move into our Amidah and move ourselves into a prayerful posture, this is our chance to know that we'll be taking a little bit of time for ourselves as well as the time we're taking for the words of the liturgy. Time to reflect on who we are in the chain of tradition and to reflect on who we and those who follow us will yet become. The Amidah starts on page 124. We rise as we are able.
Adonai sepatai tiftach ufri yagi tehillatcha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לפני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומיתו מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד ימיך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו ומלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור לדור נגיד גודלך, ונצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. We're going to take a moment now for our own individual silent prayer.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
Beautiful. We're going to transition now to our Torah service. This week, we find ourselves in a particularly dramatic climax of the Torah story. This is Shabbat Yitro, which means that this week we are reading the Torah's account of the moment at Sinai when God reveals the Ten Commandments to Moses and the Israelites. So, Barbara, if you want to give us a little traveling music to get us on the road to Sinai.
לך אדוני, הגדולה והגבורה, לך תפארת, לך נצח, לך הוד, ככל בשמיים ובארץ, לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנשא לכל בראש.
This morning we will be reading the text of the Ten Commandments from Exodus chapter 20. This morning I'll be doing something a bit different than what I normally do with you when we read Torah. I'll be reading a bit of Hebrew and then the rest of the passage in English. I think it's helpful for us at least once or twice a year to remember what's in the Ten Commandments, to revisit them before we do a little bit of learning about them. So chapter 20 of the book of Exodus begins this way. וידבר אלוהים את כל הדברים האלה לאמור, אנוכי אדוני אלוהיך, אשר הוצאתיך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. לא יהיה לך אלוהים אחרים על פניי. לא תעשה לך פסל וכל תמונה אשר בשמיים ממעל, ואשר בארץ מתחת, ואשר במים מתחת לארץ. לא תשתחווה להם ולא תעבדם, כי אנוכי אדוני אלוהיך. אל קנה פוקד עוון אבות על בנים, על שלישים ועל רבעים לשונאי, ועושה חסד לאלפים, לאוהבי ולשומרי מצוותי. The eternal God spoke all these words, saying, I, the eternal, am your who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods besides me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, or any likeness of what is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the eternal your God, am impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not swear falsely by the name of the eternal your God, for the eternal will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of the eternal your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements. For in 6 days the eternal made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them, and God rested on the 7th day. Therefore the eternal blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure on the land that the eternal your God is assigning to you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female slave, or his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. So with that dramatic reminder of the Sinai moment, that dramatic recap of the Ten Commandments, which we'll be learning a bit more about in a moment, we're going to pause for a moment of Mishaberach, a moment for us to think about those we love, those very close to us and those somewhat distant who are in need of healing, restoration in their lives now. We know many, many people these days who are in need of healing physically and emotionally, mentally and spiritually. And so this is our chance to turn outward in our prayer, to think of them and hold them in our hearts as we offer this Mishaberach.
אבותינו מקור הברכה
Amen. I want to share a few brief announcements with you before we continue with a bit of study together. This evening, Barbara will be back with you along with our cantor for tonight's Havdalah for All. That's tonight at 7 p.m. The event will be on Zoom, but we're going to ask you to pre-register so we know that you'll be with us. I'm told that there will be spices, wine, and candles involved.
It's very true.
Okay, it's going to be great. So tonight, 7 p.m., Havdalah for All. Tomorrow night, Sunday the 7th at 7, I'm very, very excited that we'll be doing having an opportunity to showcase our short documentary film about Emmanuel, the documentary called Ever Open, that was created in honor of our 75th anniversary. The film is great. If you didn't have a chance to watch it when we premiered it here at Temple last year, I urge, I beg, I implore you to come join us tomorrow night at 7 to watch the movie, and you'll have an opportunity to be in conversation with me and with Stephen Fenberg, our member and the director of the short film. The film is terrific, and the opportunity to ask Stephen some questions about it will be invaluable. So please make a point of joining us. Again, please register on the website so we know you'll be joining us. Purim is coming close to us, and on Purim, there are a few ritual commandments that are associated with the holiday. I was just teaching my confirmation class this a few days ago. One of the commandments for Purim is to hear the Megillah read. You can't do that until Purim itself, but the other ones, to eat a celebratory meal, to give money to charity, and to exchange treats with friends, all three of those you can do before the holiday starts, and we will make it possible for you to do so. Our Helfman Religious School is selling hamantashen, which you can eat at your feast, and we're also selling mishloach manot. These are gifts and treats and goodies that you can exchange with friends and family and neighbors. So those gift baskets and hamantashen are our way to connect with you, given that we can't have our good old-fashioned Purim carnival this year. Those items are available for the whole community to purchase to help support our religious school and the good work that it does, and to help you enable yourselves to fulfill the mitzvot of the holiday. The deadline to buy hamantashen and mishloach manot gift baskets is next Friday, February 12th. There's more information on our website. Any of our friends at Helfman will be happy to answer your questions about how you can get your hands on some delicious hamantashen and mishloach manot baskets. Lastly, a reminder that Emmanuel is still in phase 2 of our reopening plan, which does not allow for public in-person worship on Shabbat, but our worship will continue to be accessible online this way. And I'm going to ask you again to keep your eyes on our website and on our congregational communications, where we will share with you further developments as they arise about our reopening plan. All right, so let's learn a little Torah. So this morning, this week, this Shabbat, we return to Parashat Yitro. We return to our recitation of, our exploration of, our encounter with the Ten Commandments. And speaking of encounters with the Ten Commandments, I must urge you, if you haven't yet, pick up a copy of this marvelous new book, inscribed Encounters with the Ten Commandments. This is a must for any educated and enthusiastic Jew to have on your shelf. It's really a marvelous resource. I can't recommend it highly enough. That's available for purchase now at the CCAR Press or at your friendly neighborhood synagogue gift shop. But let's talk a little bit more about the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments, in context, represent a singularly dramatic and significant moment in the relationship between heaven and earth, between God and humanity. Even in the Torah's own sense of the story it tells, what happens at Sinai is an incomparably high point in the drama. What happens here shapes the relationship of the Jewish people with God for every moment thereafter, and it rivals the other dramatic moments in Israel's life, like the redemption from slavery and even the creation of the world at the beginning of the book of the Genesis. So what happens here, the importance of what happens at Sinai cannot be overstated. And then after the Torah's story itself, generations of Jews who come after then have to make their own decisions about how to commemorate and how to acknowledge the importance of Sinai in such a way that doesn't, frankly, overshadow the rest of the Torah. There is a vigorous debate in the Talmud and even in our own modern Reform movement about whether the Ten Commandments should be read ritually in the synagogue in the same way that the Shema is read. The early Reform rabbis and some of the rabbis in the Talmud also address this question. Maybe there should be a moment, a devotional moment in the Shabbat service where everybody stands to their feet and we recite the Ten Commandments from beginning to end the same way that we read the Shema, as another sort of parallel moment of dramatic devotion to the covenant of Israel. It's interesting because the Ten Commandments themselves, while they're stirring and dramatic and important, don't encapsulate the full breadth of Jewish moral commandments. There's lots of stuff in Jewish law and in Jewish practice that are left out of the Ten Commandments, after all. There's no commandment to give charity. There's no commandment to be kind to strangers. There's no commandment to look after the widow or the orphan, to look after the bride and groom, to take care of people who are sick or dying. None of those commandments make their way into the Ten Commandments. Nevertheless, the set of 10 that are revealed at Sinai retain almost a mythical status of significance, and they rise, in a sense, above the other 603 commandments of the Torah. So we're going to take just a second now to look at a couple of ancient texts which reflects the rabbis wrestling with how to appropriately appreciate the importance of the Ten Commandments, and yet how to avoid giving the impression that the Ten Commandments are important and the rest of the Torah are not. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to try to share a piece of text with you on our screen so that we can look at one of these texts together. So what we have here is an excerpt from a work called Shir HaShirim Rabbah. This is a midrashic treatment on the Song of Songs. So the way this works is that the writers of the midrash go through Song of Songs, and they seize on one verse at a time to explicate them in sort of fanciful narrative ways. What's happening in this verse is they come to a verse in Song of Songs where the female speaker is speaking about her beloved male partner, and she says about him, his hands are like rods of gold. He's so beautiful. His arms or his hands are like bars of gold. And so in this text, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Nehemiah says, this reminds me of the giving of the Ten Commandments. Why, you ask? Well, you'll find out. Because, he says, the tablets of the Ten Commandments were of a miraculous nature. The book of Exodus describes them just as 2 tablets of stone, but Rabbi Yehoshua says, no, there's really something miraculous about the medium on which those 10 commandments were written. They rolled up like scrolls, but they were made of hard stone. So just imagine what he's envisioning here. A hard stone tablet that can roll up like a scroll. Rabbi Menachem said in the name of Rabbi Abun, that, yes, they were miraculous, but they were miraculous in a different way. They were hewn from the orb of the sun. It's like they were carved out of the sun themselves. That's how luminous and glowing and miraculous the tablets of the Ten Commandments were. Not like any other book or scroll or tablet that we know of. How were they inscribed? The rabbis ask each other. Well, they are inscribed the way we might see them in popular artistic depictions today. 5 on one tablet and 5 on the other. As it says in Shir HaShirim, in Song of Songs, his hands are like rods of gold. So you can see we've got one hand on this side with 5 fingers, one hand on this side with 5 fingers. That reminds us of the Ten Commandments. One tablet here with 5, one tablet here with another 5 commandments. This follows the view of Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel, who adduced the verse, God wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. The rabbis now say, with a sort of expansive impulse toward broadening the scope and the importance of the Ten Commandments, maybe the tablets were so miraculous because they included more than just 10. This is going to blow your mind a little bit. Here's what the rabbis say. The rabbis say, no, there were 10 on each tablet. As it says, God declared to you the covenant which God commanded you to perform, those 10 statements, the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 commandments, and God wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. So the way the rabbis are doing the math here is he's saying, well, the text stipulates 10 commandments, and the text stipulates 2 tablets. So maybe we're supposed to understand that as that you multiply 2 by 10 and you get 20 commandments altogether. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said there were 20 on each tablet. As it says, God wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. That is 20 on each. Maybe now there were not just 10 on each commandment, there were 20 on each commandment for a total of 40. So you can see how the number of commandments enfolded in these miraculous, luminous, folding, rolling stone tablets continues to multiply. Rabbi Simlai says, no, there were 40 on each stone. As it says, tablets that were written on both their sides, on this one side and that. So what Rabbi Simlai is saying, when it says they were written on both sides, it doesn't mean the left side and the right side. It means that both the left and the right tablets had writing on their front side and their back side. So you've got 2 times 10 on this side, 2 times 10 on this side, 2 times 10 here, and 2 times 10 here. There were 40 on each stone in a square. Hananiah, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua's brother, said, between every 2 statements were written the sections and details of the Torah. Rabbi Yochanan, in the course of studying the scripture, came to this verse. He used to say, I have to thank the son of Rabbi Yehoshua's brother for teaching me this. Just as in the sea, between every 2 large waves, there are small waves. So between every statement and the next one, the sections and the details of the Torah were written. Let me try to explain what's going on here. So as the rabbis' imaginative depiction of what the 10 commandments might have looked like as their growth and their scope expands, getting bigger and bigger from 10 to 20 to 40 to 80. They now suggest that the 10 commandments, the tablets of the 10 commandments, are so expansive that the 10 commandments somehow include and enfold the whole Torah itself. The 10 commandments are getting so big and so wide and so expansive that in a sense they're like a wrapping around the rest of the Torah. Just like he says, the way you can imagine the small waves that come in between big waves. The big waves here are each of the 10 commandments, and the small waves are the rest of the Torah text. So what we have here is something that later rabbis are going to be very, very troubled by. That not just the scope and scale, but the importance of the 10 commandments is so much greater that it dwarfs the rest of the Torah by comparison. This is getting a little bit worrisome. This should get a little bit worrisome because it's suggesting that the rest of the Torah is somehow subordinate to the 10 commandments, and maybe that the rest of the Torah is irrelevant, God forbid, when compared with the 10 commandments. So I want you to sort of park that in one section of your brain's parking lot, and we're going to look at one last piece of text before we close. Why were there 2 tablets? This is from a different Midrashic collection talking about the book of Exodus that we just read. Why were there 2 tablets? Well, the rabbis say that corresponds to heaven and earth. Or maybe those correspond to groom and bride. Or maybe they correspond to 2 groomsmen. Or maybe they correspond to this world and the world to come. So you see the same impulse in this Midrash to try to expand how great and grandiose the 10 commandments are, that they not only encompass all of the Torah, but that they encompass all of human life, that they encompass all of creation, or that they encompass all of space and time at once. So if you're not troubled yet by this, I hope that you're at least intrigued by these midrashic approaches to how great and enormous and significant the 10 commandments are. They're so important that not only do they dwarf the Torah by comparison, but they dwarf all of the rest of God's creation as well. Now, we shouldn't be quite so quick to accept these as face value, and later generations of rabbinic teaching, and certainly in modern teaching, there's a corresponding impulse to sort of press back down the 10 commandments to their previous shape, so that they're not of any greater status or size of the rest of Torah, because we don't want to give the mistaken impression that you can just take the 10 commandments and that would be the entirety of Jewish practice and leave the rest. That would put much of the rabbinate and much of Jewish life out of business if all there was the 10 commandments. And so I want to close with a little story about the 10 commandments. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a king. And the king had a great and expansive territory in his kingdom. And so he commissioned the royal map maker to make him a map of his territory. A few days go by, the map maker comes back and he presents the king with a copy of the map on a piece of paper, and it's beautiful and well illustrated and inspiring, and the king loves it. And he's looking closer and he says, royal map maker, your map is beautiful, and I'm grateful that you helped show all of the dimensions of my vast kingdom. But there's a creek behind the palace that I don't see on the map. The map maker said, "Oh, well, Your Highness, the scale of the map is such that it doesn't give us that kind of detail. Only have, you'll see the mountains and you see the ocean, but we don't have the kind of detail that we need here to show you the creek." So the king says, "Well, I love that creek behind my palace. I've got to see that in the map. I want you to go back and make a different map that will show me the creek behind the palace." So the map maker goes back and he comes back a few days later with a much larger map because the king still wants the whole kingdom reflected on the map. This is a huge piece of paper. And true to his word, it reflects the blue line of the creek running behind the palace, in addition to the mountain ranges and the coastline and the ocean beyond it. King looks at the map and he loves it very much and he thanks the royal map maker for his work, but he says, "Just one more thing, royal map maker. Your map is beautiful, but I noticed that on your map there's a little clump of trees that I love to sit under by the side of that creek, and I don't see the clump of trees reflected in this map. I see the blue line that shows the creek, but where's my clump of trees?" Map maker says, "Well, Your Highness, again, the scale of this map is so big that while we're able to get the creek on there, we couldn't get as much detail to show every individual group of trees. That would be impossible." So the king sends him back once again and tells him he's got to see that clump of trees. This happens again and again and again, as you might imagine, the king wanting more and more detail on maps that will display every detail of the kingdom that he reigns over, until eventually the map maker comes back with a map that is so enormous, it fills the entirety of the throne room. It is so big to show every detail of everything in the kingdom that the king realizes that the thing that the royal map maker has produced is no longer useful as a map. It's so big and so cumbersome and unwieldy that he can't use it to navigate his palace. It fills up the entire palace. He can't really use it to get where he's going if he wants to travel from one part of the kingdom to the other. So he apologizes to the royal map maker, and takes back the original map, which was of a portable, manageable size that only showed the general contours and outlines of the parts of his kingdom. So the reason that this story is told as part of our learning of the Ten Commandments is that the Ten Commandments are that first map. They give us only the general contours of the grand expanse of Jewish law and Jewish life. Not everything is included in them. We're going to be frustrated if we expect to find in the Ten Commandments all of the mitzvot that make Jewish life as rich and meaningful and rewarding as we know that it is. All that the Ten Commandments can give us is a general sketch of what it means to be a moral person, what it means to take seriously the needs and autonomies of other people, what it means to recognize that we live in covenant with God and that we have certain obligations to pay to God in exchange for God's liberating, redeeming presence. So as we make our way forward from Shabbat Yitro to the weeks that follow, I want to encourage you to do some thinking about the way that those Ten Commandments resonate in your lives, but also to think about the way that they are a finger pointing to a presence beyond themselves, that they remind us of the vast ocean that exists behind those small waves. All of that great ocean awaits us to enter into, to swim in the sea of Torah, to get ourselves fully acquainted with the rich breadth and depth of the entirety of all God teaches and all God reveals. So Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for learning with me. Always a delight to get a chance to talk a little bit about the Ten Commandments with all of you. And so we're going to turn now, as we do at the end of each opportunity that we share on Shabbat, to take just a moment of memory and recollection, of mourning and memory. And so as we do, our thoughts turn, as they do each Shabbat, our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones and those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We'll take just a moment for our own memory now. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own Zichronam Livracha. May their memories be for a blessing. The words of Kaddish are on page 294 of our prayer books. We rise for Kaddish together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach, v'alam l'olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran ba'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Barbara, what are we gonna close with this morning before we get to Kiddush Motzi?
We are going to close with Shir Hadash, sing a new song.
Beautiful.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen l'chaim.
Amen and l'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Beautiful. B'tei avon. Well, friends, I want to wish all of you a restful Shabbat, a day on which you have a chance to let your soul breathe a little bit, to take some time to do the things that fill you back up after a week of depletion and exhaustion, to take some time to allow yourself to be re-ensouled on this Shabbat of rest and this Shabbat of revelation, this day that we remember and recommit ourselves to all the things that God has commanded us.
Sing unto God, all the earth, a new song. We'll sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along. All the earth, a new song unto God. Shiru Adonai, haaretz. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.